Are we okay now, Fiona?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, fine. I don't think we were all introduced. Mrs. Oliver at the outset. My name is Jerome Davidson. I'm chairing this meeting. We have two other councillors on this session. That's Councillor Patricia Ellis and Councillor Michaela Martin. The other members of this meeting are officers. That's our Borough Solicitor Daniel Bainbridge. Fiona Cameron is our Democratic officer who is recording this meeting. And Paul Hughes, who's our licensing manager. Also, Ms. Oliver, if you hadn't realized that there's Karen Cochran, who is a solicitor for the applicant, Mr. Dawson, the owner of the pub. Have I caught everybody correctly?
Yes, I think so, Chairman.
In terms of starting this meeting and running it, it is being recorded. If anybody has any need to step in and question or speak at the meeting, would you please raise your hand? And Fiona will pick that up and link you in order of hands raised. To start off the meeting, I think we need to just make sure that we got no matters of interest to disclose. I haven't myself. Michaela?
No, none.
Patricia?
No.
So we then move on to the actual body of the meeting, which is the application for a licensing change for the Charterhouse Sounds on Deanery Road. It's quite a bundle of papers to read through. Perhaps Mr. Paul Hughes, could I ask you to give a quick summary of the application and the objections from the local residents?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you have in front of you an application to vary a premises licence for the Charterhouse Arms, Deanery Road, Godalming, where 3 representations have been received from other persons. The applicants propose in brief to amend the plans to incorporate an external servery. All other licensable activities are to remain the same. Annex 1, you have a copy of their current licence for the Charterhouse Arms. Annex 2 is a copy of the application. Annex 3 is the current plans of the premises licence. Annex 4 is the new proposed plans. And Annex 5 is the surrounding areas. A copy of the representations from the other persons is attached to Annex 6. I would just like to clarify, if I could at this point, with Karen, with the 2 plans. We've got the old and the new plan. Red, we normally have red as designating the licensable areas, Karen, and on the old plan it is just the internal areas of the premises that are for licensable activities. But on the new plan, the whole area, including what looks like an extended area on the map of the car park, is all in red. Can I just clarify whether you want that all to be licensed outside so that the sale of alcohol can take place outside?
Yeah, please unmute yourself, Karen. You're still muted. Fiona, can you unmute? There you go.
There you go. I think I'm there. Sorry. Yeah, so the plan is that they're going to sell alcohol from outside. There is a bar that's been set up, but for flexibility, if they were ever to set up a mobile bar anywhere else, we thought we'd just draw the red line, but there's not a proposal for anything else licensable outside. So people will be consuming in that area and alcohol would be able to be sold in that area.
Are you happy for me to put a key there to say the outside area is for the sale of alcohol only and no other licensable activities like music, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, the Live Music Act and deregulation allows it. And
Yeah.
I've said in my application, we're not doing anything after 11 o'clock regulated wise, I think. Hold on. Yeah, please note that there's no proposal to provide regulated entertainment beyond 11 p.m. That's on the application. So yeah, no, very happy for you to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just clarify, excuse me, Paul, could I just clarify that, Karen? There'll be no music outside, no entertainment outside, just the consumption of alcohol in the outside area.
From a licensable point of view, but from the legislation changed a while ago, so it's been deregulated. So technically, you could have music outside, but never beyond 11 p.m. And they're not going to do anything beyond 11 p.m.
Right, but you're just looking purely to be able to provide consumption of alcohol, no other entertainment, no music outside.
No, that's not the application.
If I could, is it right, Mrs. Oliver?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can I just clarify? So at the moment, they, as you're seeing, they've increased, the car park has basically become somewhere where they're drinking alcohol, which was never previously the case. Is what we're saying is that they're trying to extend the line so that they can actually sell alcohol there, and that the licensable activities, so that you just said that you could have live entertainment in that car park. I mean, that strikes me as a massive, massive potential issue for us, because this is a residential area.
They can already do that. They're already permitted to have entertainment in the car park. So the laws change. The Live Music Act was passed in 2012, and it said, and it includes a car park area. So if they wanted to, they could, but they couldn't do anything beyond 11 o'clock. So
and is that
nothing to do with this application?
No, understood. But I mean, our concerns, I think, locally are very much that the activities that are going on there. 11 o'clock is really late in an area where there's, lots of families, children, old people, and the entire feeling of this car park is now being used for something it was never designed to be used for. And I appreciate that may be correct within, what you're saying, this Live Music and Deregulation Act. But is there nothing that the councillors can do to put a condition on that? Do we have to stick to 11 o'clock? I mean, that's pretty serious in a local, in a residential area.
That's the law, so that's what they're allowed to do. If there were problems, then you can always review a licence. And at a licensing review, they could then condition it. So it's not you can't sort of speculate that there's going to be issues. But if there were issues,
actually, there already have been issues with the amount of noise and with the amount of disruption, and the change of use has already caused quite a lot of disruption. So one of the things I'd like the councillors, when they're thinking about this application, to think about is whether we could add any conditions on to whatever we decide today, or maybe the existing licence to say that actually what's going on right now is causing disruption to the local neighbourhood.
Right. I think that's probably, we're a bit ahead of ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah,
but
whilst we're going through this, I'd like everyone to keep in mind, I'm sure everybody knows the area, it's really very highly residential, lots of families, lots of older people, and this, the current activities are causing us problems, and that's really what this is about. It's not wanting the pub to operate, it's the difference, the change that's gone on to date.
I'll leave you to get back later on, Mrs. Oliver, to represent the views of your local community. Councillor Martin, you raised your hand.
Yes, what is this movable bar? Will we take it to the entrance and sell to the public on the highway, or is it going to be wandering around the garden?
No, that's just purely the reality is that there is a bar servery in an existing bit already. I don't think there's any proposal, but I represent nearly 3,000 pubs for this particular client, and they sometimes do little pop-up bars. So if that's what they were going to do, this red line allows them to do that. I mean, the red line could just be around that little bar outside, if that helps people, but I think it just allows them to be flexible.
So we could have just a red line around the servery?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So that was a bit of an interruption there. Paul, would you like to continue?
Well, no, that was the end of it. It was just I was going to say, just say officers request that you consider the application.
Not sure. This is exactly what we're doing. Mrs. Oliver, would you
Yes.
like to continue on with your objections, which I seem to note are primarily concerned with noise, rudeness, and
It's
noise from.
actually, yeah, it's more about the fact that it feels to us that there's been a massive change of use in relation to the car park, and whether or not that was within the law doesn't really make any difference to the fact that this is the first time that we've actually been consulted in relation to that amended car park use. So previously, any kind of outside drinking was done in a very small space, sort of towards the end of Deanery Road or on the Chalk House side. So very much that blocked off the noise to the residents, and there wasn't so much disruption. They've basically closed off the car park to cars, so we've now got lots of customers parking on our road, which is causing congestion. We've got lots and lots of noise being generated from the car park now, which was never the case previously. And I think, to me, all of that causes a nuisance to the local community, and it also means that we're being asked without consultation. I mean, none of this is about not wanting a pub at the end of the road. In fact, when we moved here, we were quite pleased to have a pub at the end of the road that we know you could pop in for a drink, and that's what a community should be about. But all of this has been done very much without the involvement of the community, without any kind of buy-in from us. I mean, we're slightly luckier than most because we're a few houses away from the pub, but the people who are right next door are having a horrific time. They've had to go out during the day. They've had to, they've taken themselves off for the day because they know there's going to be a big thing going on at the pub, and they've we just want to be able to sit in our garden and talk to each other, and we can't do that. And so I think it just, to the community, it feels like there's been a massive change of use. This is the first time, we've been given an opportunity to actually have any input in relation to that change of use. And it has changed the character of the pub, I'm afraid. And also that, our own amenities to park in our own road and things like that, because there's no longer parking in that pub. And that's sort of where I've got to, I'm afraid.
Okay, so as I understand it, the two main objections are the noise which is being created, the loss of car parking space, and spill the cars and the pub visitors up the road.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, and I think both of those, to my mind, are public nuisance grounds, aren't they?
I think that's an opinion. Is there anything you'd like to, sorry, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure whether this is the appropriate time for me to ask some questions of the applicants, but if I may, I'd like to ask for some details relating to the servery, the type of structure it is, whether food will be served from the servery, whether alcohol. I think it's clear from what was said previously that it's actually going to be sold from the servery. So I'd like to ask, please, some details of the actual structure of this servery and how drinks that could be sold, how will they be stored during the day, during the time that the pub is open, but equally during the time it's closed. So I just feel, I'm sorry, there's a lack of details in the application with regard to the design, the structure of the servery. And I would like to have, if I may, some more details about it. Thank you.
Okay, Ian, I think it's probably easier for Ian, who's at the site, to I don't know if you can jump in, Ian, to explain what it is how you're going to run the bar.
Chairman, sorry to both Ms. Cochrane and Mr. Dawson. It feels as though we've got into the questioning on the application stage before the applicants had a chance to outline their application. I think that's probably come from the clarification point earlier, which is a very fair point. but ordinarily we would ask the applicant to outline their application. And I don't have the order of play in front of me, unfortunately, Chairman, but we would then have the other part. There would be any questions to the applicant, then hear from Ms. Oliver in terms of her objection, and then any questions to her, discussion, and so on. So we're sort of just slightly past, I think, that stage of the outline of the application. I think if that were to happen, it might actually address some of these points, and then from both Ms. Cochrane and Mr. Dawson, and then if Councillor Ellis and others want to ask their questions, that would be best.
Well, thank you for bringing me into order.
Apologies, Chairman.
No, you're quite right to bring me into order. Before we go too much further down answering questions, Councillor Ellis, any further clarification of your application which you need to get across to us, either Mr. Dawson or Mr. Cochrane?
Well, I've got some submissions to make, so I think it's probably, it'll probably clarify up questions that you've got, hopefully. So if I suggest then we get back into order as I've been instructed. These are just strange times, aren't they?
And if you could make the submissions now, and then at the same time possibly answer Councillor Ellis's questions with regard to the setup for the outside dispensary.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So we've, as you've heard, we've submitted an application for a major variation. You have to use a major variation procedure if you're going to extend your licensable area. So the plan is to amend the licensing plan to permit the sale of alcohol from an external servery, essentially at the moment to assist with social distancing. So the current licensing plan, which you've got, clearly shows that much of the area already is labelled as an external drinking area. The variation is to permit the sale of alcohol outside, in addition to the current permission, which already lets you consume alcohol outside, and to extend that external area to the rear on the plan. People can currently sit and drink outside the pub, and they will continue to be able to do so, certainly for the foreseeable future, irrespective of what happens at today's hearing. The licence, as I've said already, has an external area. The licence also allows for off sales, on and off sales of alcohol. And the new Business and Planning Act made it quite clear that pubs would be able to use car parks and terraces as drinking and dining areas, as I say, certainly for the foreseeable future. We are in just very interesting times. Normally I'd be sitting in front of you and lots of things are changing. We're giving consideration to encouraging social distancing. We want customers to be seated as far away from each other as we can sensibly do that. And we want to use this outside servery. As I understand it, and when I finished with my representation, perhaps Ian can explain further exactly how he's going to operate it. But there's they're modifying an existing structure from which they will be selling alcohol to avoid essentially overcrowding in the bar inside. The outside server will provide additional protection for customers and staff. There are some mentions about food, but the sale of food, after it's not licensable activity, so that's not really for today's hearing. Only if we sell alcohol after 11 o'clock would that become a licensable activity, and I don't believe that's proposed. So essentially the only changes requested are for drinks to be sold in the outside area as well as inside the pub, and for the external area to be increased in size to aid social distancing. And I think it's difficult to see how buying a drink outside rather than inside is going to impact particularly on the licensing objectives, bearing in mind customers are already permitted to sit outside. I think it's probably worth reminding everybody we're not in a licensing review. We're not reviewing this license. It's not a forum to raise general concerns. It's to look at these changes that we've applied for. The statutory guidance quite clearly says that for representations to be relevant, they should be confined to the subject matter of the variation. And the subject matter of this variation is extending this red line and permitting drinks to be sold from this external servery. So we're not changing the hours. We're not adding on any licensable activities. With regard to the representations that have been raised, there seems to be concern about who the site's currently attracting as customers. And I'm afraid that's not relevant to this hearing or any licensing hearing. A business can choose to let who they choose through the door, so long as they don't discriminate. As I've already said, the sale of food's not relevant to today's hearing. That's not a licensable activity unless we start serving it after 11 o'clock at night. There's some concern raised with regard to children not being permitted currently. I was away last weekend. There were lots of pubs with signs saying that they're not admitting children at the moment. I think part of the problem is that children running around doesn't fit very easily into people's COVID risk assessments. Before all of COVID, I used to spend lots of time trying to persuade committees to allow children into pubs. Certainly up in Scotland, they're very reluctant to let children in. But I think it's interesting that there are concerns now that this site have chosen, certainly in the interim, I believe, not to have children running around. And I have to say, I've never had a site volunteering to have door staff on and been faced with a representation objecting to them being there. Normally it's the police asking for door staff and us saying we don't need them. But I think it's proof you just can't please all of the people all of the time. I think door staff, when you're trying to comply with all these new rules and guidance, is a very sensible step to have taken. With regard to parking and traffic noise, again, I'm sure your legal advisor will be able to clarify this, but again, that's not a matter for this hearing at all. Traffic, the licensing facilities look at the licensing objectives, and I'm afraid parking is and traffic noise and things like that aren't relevant to today's hearing. A well-run and decent pub is an asset to any community, and I would say that this landlord has lots of support from the local community. He's approachable, he's certainly happy to look into any concerns that are raised. But to reiterate, today is solely about whether to allow him to sell drinks outside, to reduce customer traffic inside, and to have customers able to sit in a larger outside area, which is, from what I've read, much safer for people, and I expect will continue to be so. I think it is really relevant that there are no representations from the responsible authorities. They're the experts in their field when it comes to the licensing objectives. I think it's also worth me reminding you that the Licensing Act is a permissive piece of legislation. You've got that safeguard that if there are concerns, then the license can be reviewed. But very often, it's just the concerns are often speculative, and I think sometimes you need to give us the rope to see if we hang ourselves or not. We don't know how long the COVID issue is going to be with us. I think many of the steps that premises are taking currently will be here to stay for some time. I don't expect I'm going to be queuing at a bar anytime soon. And I think it's important that the steps being taken are supported. They are aimed at public safety. Clearly, they shouldn't be at the expense of local residents. But my view is that I'm not sure how selling a drink outside as well as inside is going to have any impact really on the licensing objectives, given they're already allowed to use this outside area for the consumption of alcohol. So I don't know if I can go over to Ian and see if you can answer the question that's already been raised about how you're storing your alcohol and how you're going to use the outside bar.
So the outside bar, hello everyone, basically is linked to our cellar through a set of pipes. We have shut-off valves inside. We serve a limited selection outside, just our main cellars. It helps basically, you know, if we don't want large queues of people around the bar, this is a COVID risk. With it being quite a small premises, we need to maximise the space that we have so we can serve people safely and make it an effective, useful business.
Thanks, Ian. So I think that's our submissions really. We'd like to sell out outside. We'd like to spread out outside. The noise, environmental health are responsible for noise concerns. I'm sure if there was any real noise from people outside that they would take action. But I don't think there's no proposed for there to be music outside till late or anything like that. It's just spreading out and having a drink outside. So the noise will just be from people sitting outside. They can't sit in groups of more than 6 from today. So you've got small groups sitting outside. And I think in the circumstances, that's a reasonable application to make. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis, has your question been answered?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it has. And with respect, I asked the question because for me personally, it was important. And I didn't feel that there were any details, or for me, sufficient details within the application relating to the structure and how they would store the drinks. And I also wanted to know whether food would be, whether it would be a kitchen area as well, whether food would be prepared in the outside area. Thank you.
We would only do something like a one-off barbecue or something out there. We do have a full functioning kitchen on site, so we kind of just walk around and just hand the food over to people. It wouldn't be being prepared unless we were doing a one-off barbecue.
Thank you.
Anybody got any other questions directly of the submission?
Could I, yes, Chairman, could I just clarify, it's not in the application, but it was referred to, Karen referred to security staff there. Only because you brought it up, Karen. Can I clarify that they would be SIA licensed?
All SIA doormen, yes.
Yeah.
Now, if I could hand over to Mrs. Oliver.
Sorry, just on that security staff thing, my objection is not there being security staff. My objection, I'm not sure why you need it on a Sunday afternoon, but whatever. My objection is the language that they use in a residential area in front of my 10-year-old child.
I think that's been dealt with now.
Yes, but Ms. Cochrane, the point is you seem to be implying that I was objecting to the security staff being there at all. My objection is merely to the fact that the language that they are using is inappropriate in a residential area in front of my 10-year-old child on a Sunday afternoon.
I have had a word with our security staff and I've instructed them that this is not appropriate.
Thank you.
Now, to continue on, Ms. Oliver, would you like to expand further on what you've already stated are your concerns about the submission? Yeah,
so I mean, you're absolutely right. It has to, my objection, it does relate to the variation proposed, and it's all around the intensification of that use, which is, as you say, we can't object here and now to what is going on in the car park, which I think is a nuisance. But what I think the objection is this is the only chance we've had to object to an intensification of that use. Because I think the reality is if you're serving drinks in that outside area, you're intensifying that use, which has been changed and which is already a nuisance. And so the only other point I wanted to make, so going back to what Ms. Cochrane was saying, was I have no objections to who their target audience is at all. I mean, the reality is, bikers, by the nature of how much their vehicles cost, are not youths who are throwing their weight around the local community. I mean, we do, as a matter of fact, I mean, I know that you put signs up saying no revving here, and, be aware of the fact this is res, and that's very gratefully, received. But, there is still a bit of a problem there. And on this last weekend past, there's a bit of a set to between the local youths who were congregating in a home-based car park, and as they were going past your pub, obviously they decided to cause a bit of a, let's rev the engines, let's do a bit of that going out that side, which wasn't particularly nice when you're trying to get your kids to sleep. But the point is, I don't object to the customers. I want to make that very, very clear. My objection is merely to the intensification of the use as a result of this variation application, given that the current use is already causing a nuisance.
I would like to state that the youths were not attending our pub, and they
weren't.
rode past. So I can't be responsible for what people in the street are doing, going past on the main road.
Okay, is there any other questions or issues to be raised? Councillor Martin?
No, I haven't. Oh, the only one was about the servery. No, I haven't.
Seem to be shared with Councillor Ellis.
Yeah.
Is there any questions or concerns from the officers? I suggest then we go back and step out and deliberate what we've heard.
Sorry, can I just say one more thing? Ms. Cochrane kept saying that we have that in context of the current COVID regulations, that that this is all very reasonable. But as far as I could see, that variation wasn't being proposed for a limited time period. It wasn't being limited to the length of time that whenever these COVID restrictions are going on. Is that right?
No, I mean, the proposal is for a variation of the license.
Right. So why is it relevant then about the COVID regulations? Because it strikes me that hopefully we'll come out of the COVID regulations sooner or later, but the variation isn't limited to that time period.
It's not. The reason I mentioned it is that use of the area is definitely allowed already at the moment. But we don't know how long this is going to go on for, and actually I think it's actually very sensible to have customers spread out
at this time. But what my point is it's not limited to this time, is it?
No, it's not. No, I think the proposal is that we're going to be able to sell outside, and that people are going to be able to sit outside in this area. They're already allowed to sit outside. Before the Business and Planning Act came in, they were allowed to sit outside in a reduced area, but there's always been customers sitting outside and drinking. What we're saying is, because it's a small premises, that actually being able to buy drinks outside is better, and having more customers outside, bearing in mind we're not applying for them to be outside any later than they're already allowed to be out there. So that, yes, technically more people will be allowed to sit outside, but we've no idea how long this is going to go on for. And in all reality, I think lots of changes are going to end up being permanent, that we're going to try and spread people out. But no, you're quite right. We're not proposing that this is only going to last until the end of COVID, whenever that might be. The proposal is that they will be able to use this facility because it's safe for people. If it's safe for people now, it will always be safer for people to not be crowded around a bar.
Mr. Dawson, you put your hand up.
I just wish to point out some of the objections that Ms. Oliver has put in were even before we'd opened the doors. So some of these seem slightly vexatious rather than, an actual factual objection. There's only 3 objections from the local community. We have a good feedback and good relationship with most of our neighbours. If you read some of the objections Ms. Oliver's put in, she is of the opinion that there should be a certain type of pub. Due that we chose it to be a different sort of pub, I believe a lot of her objections are not what she wants.
I think I've made it very clear that I have no objections to your customers, and I find it rather defamatory that you imply that I'm vexatious. I think
we're going around in a bit of circles here. Mr. Bainbridge.
Chairman, I was going to pick up some other points, but I will just pick up that point. I mean, officers always consider the relevance of representations that they receive, be they from responsible authorities or from individual objectors. So as far as we're concerned. Ms. Oliver's representation is a valid one, otherwise it wouldn't be before you. Same for the other residents as well. Just to pick up some of the points before you retire, the point that's just been discussed, which is around COVID, and the fact that I did advise you, the committee, before the meeting, that you were considering this application as though the COVID restrictions weren't in place. I know they are of relevance, to a degree, but yes, this application is effectively a freestanding application that would, survive beyond that. And my advice to you beforehand was you have to think of it in the context of normality, albeit that we predict that normality will not return in its entirety soon. Just one or two other points, and I appreciate, Ms. Oliver, that you may not want to hear this, but some of the points that have been made by Ms. Cochrane are correct in as far as the relevance of things like car parking and so on are to this application, and change of use, intensification, and also any, and I appreciate what you've just said regarding this, but any objection relating to sort of the type of establishment it might be, or clientele, and so on. And I appreciate that you've clarified that, in the last few minutes, but those things, demand, market type, intensity, they are left to other things, such as the market itself, the drinks market, the leisure market, planning, and so on. So they're really outside of the scope of the committee. If the committee does have concern about noise from patrons, then there are conditions that could be attached to the license. But in terms of sort of intensification of car parking, that's not really something that this committee could condition in any way. And I can see the councillors nodding their head; they know that. And I think that's probably all I have to say, Chairman. So thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. What I'd like to do then is to step out and consider the objections from you, Mrs. Oliver, and the submission from Mrs. Cochrane and Mr. Dawson.
Thank
Will you be able to arrange that for us, Fiona?
you.
Let me just start that process. And you should, councillors and officers, you should see a message say inviting you to join the breakout room.
So do we just stay logged in and wait?
Please,
then?
yes, please do.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yes, Karen, Ian, and Mrs. Oliver, if you want to mute your microphones and cameras just for the time being, and just keep an ear out on the webcast or the meeting, ready to come back in when the committee rejoins.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, gone. Chairman, I think everyone is back now. Chairman,
We're
everyone's
all back now.
Yes.
Gone.
And Fiona, are you back as well?
Yes, I am, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your patience. On deliberation, we would like to recommend that we proceed with the submission for an outside survey, but to restrict the red line to the area which is marked in Annex 3, which is the outside survey.
Okay.
So there's no issue in terms of having an outside survey, but we'd like to have it restricted so it doesn't wander around up against the neighboring walls and of your adjacent properties. I don't think that's going to be a huge objection or difficulty for you to be able to manage.
No.
And I think it meets the objectives which you have. I'd just like to also confirm that, as you pointed out earlier on, Ms. Cochran, that there would be no outside music after 11 o'clock, which I think I gather you had never planned to do anyway. I'd just like to confirm that's going to be the case.
Yes.
If it's agreeable to everybody, I would like to then conclude this meeting.
Thank you very
Unless
much.
anybody's got any specific questions to ask.
Thank you.
I would ask Mr. Dawson that I would urge you to keep on engaging with your neighbours.
We do. Yeah.
I'm sure it'll help everybody in terms of keeping a smooth relationship and also keeping your neighbouring customers content.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. If I may conclude that meeting, do I need to say anything else,
Chairman,
Mrs. Fiona at all?
Chairman, apologies. Is Ms. Oliver there? So I know she's got a video.
Yes, I am. Sorry, my
You are.
video is
Sorry, I
going.
didn't hear. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that you'd heard the decision.
Yeah, I think everybody was there. Thank you very much indeed,
Thank you.
and for all your input and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Much.
Bye bye now.
Bye.
Have a good day all.
Bye.
Speak to you later. Bye.
Bye.